Hi, I am Dr. Felice Gersh, your integrative physician, speaking to you from an exam room in my office in Irvine, California. Thank you for joining me for another one of my series on living in the era of coronavirus. Today I'm going to speak about the women's issue, about women and aging and the coronavirus. And we'll touch on hormones, of course, one of my favorite topics. So, you have probably heard that when it comes to dealing with the coronavirus, women seem to do better than men. So, let's talk foundationally, what is going on there? Some people have said, well, women don't go to bars as much or hang out. They're better at social distancing. Well, that may all be true, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about not avoiding the infection, which maybe females are better at than men too. But I'm talking about when you get the infection. What happens then? Who fares better? Well, women fare better. Overall, the mortality rate of men who get infected with the coronavirus versus women who get infected is definitely favoring female survival. So, why is that? So, let's talk about some very basic differences. Well, first, I just have to tell you that it's about time that we talk about the differences between men and women. I can tell you that I basically went into my female maturity during the era of feminism, and I was a big feminist. And part of the problem with that is that it sort of emphasized men and women are the same. Well, absolutely, I 100% agree that men and women should be able to have all the same opportunities. Here I am, I'm a doctor. I want every opportunity for myself, for my daughters, for everyone who's female and male, every gender, every ethnicity, we should all have an equal opportunity because we're all capable. But when it comes to physiology, we are not the same. Females and males are quite different, and it starts at conception. So we females have two X chromosomes, and that makes a lot of difference. As you know, males are XY, females are XX. Now, you are not supposed to, as a female, have two completely functional X chromosomes. One is supposed to be deactivated shortly after conception. Well, it turns out that that extra X chromosome, which has an awful lot of genes on it, doesn't get deactivated for a while. It continues to function fully for maybe a few weeks even after conception. And during that time, that extra X chromosome is doing a lot of programming of genes related to the immune system. And even when that X chromosome does get deactivated, it's not fully deactivated. About 15% of genes stay fully active, and almost all of them are involved in immune function. So females right out the gate have a more robust, more vigorously functioning immune system. Females tend to have more immune cells. Women make more antibodies. We have a greater robust, we'll say, reaction to an infectious agent. We make more cytokines. Now, you've probably heard of the cytokine storm, so you may think cytokines are evil. Well, they are not evil. It's like everything. You want the right amount at the right time. So at the time of an infection, you want your immune system, that's your defensive army, to be out there giving it their all to kill and then gobble up, phagocytize those invaders, whether it's a virus, a fungi, a parasite, or bacteria. Whatever that invader is, you want your defensive troops, your soldiers, your immune cells to kill, destroy, and keep your body intact and healthy. Females are simply better at doing that than males. It starts with our extra X chromosome. It gets even more involved because not only do we have that extra X, we also have a lot more estrogen, my favorite hormone. I know, every hormone has its purpose and place, and I love them all, but estrogen is the master hormone. And in women, it sets the beat for our circadian rhythm. Every one of our immune cells has an estrogen receptor on it. And it turns out that our innate immune cells, they're the first responders, like the mast cells, the macrophages, the neutrophils, and the mast cells are the first of the first responders. They are embedded with estrogen receptors of the alpha variety. And so are our T cells. They're part of the lymphocyte team. And then there are the beta cells, the B cells that make the antibodies. And they are primarily of the beta type of estrogen receptor. And then there are other receptors. They're actually on the membrane. We call them membrane receptors, and there are other fancier names like jeepers. But the main thing to know is that different immune cells have different type of estrogen receptors, and they are designed to work together to protect us. Now, because we have all this estrogen and they control the immune cells, they don't turn them on, they don't turn them off. They do both. And it turns out that low levels of estrogen create a more inflammatory state, and high levels of estrogen are more anti-inflammatory. It's very interesting. When a female has a menstrual cycle, her immune system is actually a little bit different at different times of the cycle. Now, what time of the menstrual cycle is inflammatory? It's when a woman is bleeding during the period. Now, why would that be? Well, because it's an inflammatory time. The uterine lining is dying, it's dead, it's coming out. There's some inflammatory processes going on in there. In fact, inside the uterine cavity, these little inflammatory products, which come from omega-6 and arachidonic acid called prostaglandins, are produced to actually create more inflammation and to create some cramping. Just a little bit of cramping designed to help expel the old lining of the uterus so everything can be renewed and the cycle can start again for the purpose of conception. Whether we like it or not, that is the purpose of the menstrual cycle, to allow conception. Now, what about during the time of ovulation? That's when the estrogen is spiking up really high. That high level of estradiol is very anti-inflammatory. And why would that be? Remember, it's all for the purpose of successful conception. So if you want to have a pregnancy, you do not want the immune cells, our beautiful, robust, and functional immune cells, to kill what may be perceived as the invaders, those sperm. So our immune system is down-regulated. It's calmer so that our immune cells do not attack and kill those sperm so that we can get pregnant. Of course, if you don't want to get pregnant, another story for another day. This is just how we females are programmed. So we have ups and downs of estrogen produced during the menstrual cycle. So we actually have some variation in how our immune system is functioning. Well, let's now go to the topic at hand, which is what happens when a woman goes through perimenopause and menopause. What is happening to her immune cells at that time, and what can be done about it? What should we even think about doing, if anything? Well, first, let's lay the groundwork. As I mentioned, women have a more robust immune system, more vigorous, more capable of killing invaders than males. Okay? It turns out, I just want to mention, testosterone actually suppresses immune function. Now you may think that's terrible. Why would testosterone suppress immune function? Men need to live too. Well, of course they do. But you have only so much energy in the body. So you have to decide, where are you going to spend it? Okay? You've got to use it very gingerly, very appropriately. So in a male, a lot of the energy has to go into maintaining a larger body, more muscles, more bone, higher stature. And men have to use a lot of energy to keep making all those sperm. So that eats up a lot of their energy. What about women? Well, when we're born, we already have all the eggs we're ever going to have. No need to make more. We can't make more if we wanted to. And we're smaller. We have smaller volume. We have less muscle, less bone. So our bodies are programmed to use a lot of our energy to maintain our incredibly complex and robust immune system. It's just all about survival for a successful reproduction. That's what evolution is all about. So women during the reproductive years have a higher survival rate. when there's an epidemic, infection, women typically survive sepsis better than do males. Now, I just want to mention, and we can do another whole show, we're going to do another whole one about pregnancy with updates, but when women are pregnant, their estrogen, their whole variety of estrogens are different. So the dominant estrogen produced by the ovary is called estradiol. The dominant estrogen produced by the placenta is called estriol. And estriol is primarily functional on the beta receptor. Now remember I mentioned that the innate immune cells, those first responders, are alpha receptor. Well, it turns out high amounts of beta downregulate alpha. So when you have a lot of estriol, you're actually quieting down and lowering the response of those innate immune cells, the macrophages, the neutrophils, the mast cells. So your hormones in pregnancy are so different. And because the innate immune cells are calmer. Now, why would that be? Well, for the same reason that you don't want to destroy your sperm, you don't want your immune system to attack this other alien called the fetus. So your immune system is very different when you are pregnant. So it's a whole different state. We'll deal with that more on another show. So the women who are pregnant are different and they have greater risk, at least typically. So now what happens in menopause? Well, our ovaries stop making estradiol. Now, it's a gradual process. That's called the menopausal transition or the perimenopausal years. But what happens is, as time goes by, the ovaries make less and less estradiol until they make none at all. So then the only estrogen that a female has in her body is what's made in individual organs. Now, actually, many organs make estrogen. That's how men and children get estrogen. But it turns out that women's organs that make estrogen, like the gut, the brain, the skin, the lungs, many organs make estrogen, but women make less than men do on inside those organs. And after menopause, they don't make more to take up the slack. So essentially, after menopause, women live in a body that is innately estrogen deficient. Now, that doesn't mean we can't live. Of course, there are women that can live to be 100 years old. And statistically, women, even without their ovarian function, still live longer than males. Part of that is that extra X chromosome. It really keeps us going. It keeps us in so many ways from dying from sepsis and infections. Remember that extra X has those chromosomes, the genes on that extra X that are still active, and the ones that were there before we even turned off that extra X have programmed our immune system to stay more vibrant, even as we age, even without that extra estrogen. But what about as we get older and older? Well, we get more and more prone to having bad outcomes, to having infections, and even dying from them. So elderly women, they have a very high rate of death from pneumonia. This goes long before coronavirus showed up. Many women die from pneumonia. Often it occurs after they have a fracture, like they fall. Over half of women have fractures. It's from osteoporosis, another whole topic we'll talk about another time. But many fractures lead to immobility and often pneumonia from lack of walking around, not taking deep breaths, having pain, and so on, being very sedentary. You don't use your chest muscles as much, so you take shallow breaths, and pneumonia sets in. So pneumonia as a cause of death of elderly males and females is very prevalent. So what am I proposing here? Well, number one, to be aware that there is a definite change in the immune system after menopause. After menopause, the immune cells of the body no longer have the estrogen to keep them programmed properly. So they become more susceptible to triggers than releasing those inflammatory cytokines. The ones that are designed to kill off the bad invaders, they may release them more inappropriately from a low trigger, and then often can create inflammation in the body. After menopause, the gut microbial population is altered. We call that gut dysbiosis. And leaky gut or impaired gut barrier function occurs. And so much of the immune system lines the gut that when you get the wrong bacteria growing in the gut, they create these particles that are called lipopolysaccharides or endotoxins, which can enter the body, stimulate these immune cells, which are more hyper now. They're less controlled. They're more like weapons of mass destruction without a ruler to control them properly. And they're more likely to put out those inflammatory cytokines, which can circulate in the body and affect every structure, particularly the linings of arteries, creating endothelial dysfunction. Another thing that's going to change when estrogen is not produced by the ovaries is our level of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a gas. It's a very potent antioxidant. And much of the benefits of estrogen actually go through nitric oxide, which declines dramatically with aging in males and females both. And this coincides with menopause and declining levels of estrogen production. Nitric oxide is what maintains vascular health. The vascular system of the body needs to be dilated and healthy. After menopause, the vascular system becomes unhealthy. In fact, by age 75, 85% of women have hypertension. After menopause, the immune cells start entering into fat tissue, and our hormones in fat are not produced properly because they are also controlled by estrogen. So instead of making the hormone, the adipokine from fat tissue, called adiponectin in high amounts, it makes less. So our bodies are less capable of burning fat, and the fat distribution becomes inappropriate. We get more belly fat, the visceral fat, the fat around the internal organs. And as I mentioned, they get infiltrated with immune cells that create more inflammation more readily. So what happens? What are we saying? I'm saying that after menopause, women tend to get more visceral fat, which creates more inflammation. They also no longer have proper insulin control. So they end up having more insulin resistance. Blood sugars rise. Prediabetes becomes prevalent, and diabetes as well. Metabolic homeostasis is impaired, and women tend to have more hypertension, cardiovascular disease, the number one killer of women, more obesity, especially the visceral obesity. So women are no longer immune to all of these things when they lose their ovarian estrogen production. Then they become at risk of all of the adverse things that can happen, including negative effects from coronavirus. So women after menopause, and particularly as they get even older, like in the 60, 65 plus range, they have significant mortality from coronavirus. So what can you do about this? Well, there are some things you can do. You can do all the lifestyle things that we've already talked about to help as much as possible to maintain proper circadian rhythm, gut health, to optimize your inflammatory state so you have an anti-inflammatory diet, to do exercise. I mentioned exercise increases nitric oxide. That's really important. You can eat a lot of beets and green leafies that have nitrates so that the nitric oxide pathway, which goes through the gut, can stay optimized. That's another way of making nitric oxide. That's a whole other lecture, and we're going to talk about nitric oxide in just a whole Instagram because it's so important. But estrogen rules nitric oxide. It's really important to know that. And nitric oxide has many forms. We're going to talk about more of that, but one of its main forms is as an antioxidant that maintains vascular health, brain health, heart health. And now you've heard with coronavirus, I'm sure you've heard this, that it affects many organs in the body, including the brain, not just the lungs, but also the kidneys, the liver, the GI tract. All of those areas need nitric oxide in order to function properly, and estrogen helps to maintain it, but we lose it. No matter what we do, menopause will happen. So knowing this, we can do the right diet to help maintain nitric oxide production through the food we eat. We can also consider hormone therapy. Now, many of you may know that I've been so open about it. I love hormones. I love estrogen. The fact that menopause is natural does not mean losing estrogen is beneficial. That's really important. The Women's Health Initiative gave women the wrong idea. They didn't even use bioidentical hormones. They used oral Premarin, which is a conjugated estrogen, conjugated equine estrogen. It's from a horse. What does conjugated mean? It means it's already gone through the liver detoxification or the biotransformation process for elimination from the horse's body. The horse doesn't even want it anymore. It's not even properly functional. It's actually being eliminated, and then it gets put into a powdered form and swallowed by a human female. No wonder it did not give you optimal results. And then they combined it with a progestin. That's a man-made chemical that's an endocrine disruptor for progesterone. It's not progesterone. It has different effects. It's an endocrine disruptor, so it up or down regulates the receptor in different ways. And they've now shown that it was the progestin, the medroxyprogesterone acetate, that actually increased all of the bad outcome, except for blood clots and strokes, which was because of the oral conjugated equine estrogen. So basically, please take that Women's Health Initiative and all the results and apply it to exactly what they tested and nothing else. Your human estrogen is your female best friend. Okay, estradiol was not put in a female's body to harm a woman. It maintains all aspects of health, including immune health, cardiovascular health, gut health. All of those things are declined after menopause. So consider hormone therapy. This should be between you and your doctor. I'm not saying it's the right answer for every woman. I'm saying it should be discussed. And also, it's never the only answer. Hormones in the absence of proper lifestyle is not going to get you where you need to go. We know young women can have hormones, they can have functioning ovaries, and they can still be obese, they can still be unhealthy, they can have fertility problems, which is a clear-cut sign of poor health. So hormones are not the only answer, but they could be part of the solution for women in menopause to help maintain all of these functions, including a more functional immune system. We need more data. There's no question we need more studies. So a lot of what I'm saying is based on science, not on human studies, because they're not being done. They need to be done. But in the meantime, talk to your own doctor to see if that makes sense for you. Once again, I need to tell you that the FDA has only approved hormone use for women systemically for treating hot flashes. So if you use it for any other purpose, it is being used off-label. So it's important to know that so that you and your doctor can talk about it to see what makes sense for you. And I am working with other doctors now to try to raise money to do research, real proper research on physiologic dosing of hormones for women in menopause. We need research, and research requires dollars. And so if any of you are out there are interested, we have a nonprofit that is trying to raise money so that we can do really high quality research on physiologic dosing of hormones in menopause, so that we're not just talking about science, we're talking about published studies. So hopefully we can have that. In the meantime, whatever you do with hormones, make sure you do all the lifestyle things, and just recognize that once you go through menopause, you've lost that extra plus, that extra edge we had with estrogen. That when your ovaries are not making estrogen, it does put you at greater risk. And so take precautions. Make sure you do your social distancing, wash your hands regularly, be careful, be aware, take your appropriate immune support supplements, eat a great diet, do all the things that you need to do. And be aware that after menopause, you are a different functioning female than before. Loss of ovarian function has profound effects on the female body. I want you to be aware. Now, I have a couple of questions I want to address. The first one is, if you do take hormones, what's the best way to take estrogen? So I always use it transdermally. I don't use oral estrogen because when you take oral estrogen in the form of estradiol, it seems to double the risk of blood clots, which occurs with age as well. So that, by the way, has not been shown to be the case when you use transdermal or through the skin, okay? So I would always use it through the skin. And one more question. Let's see. Oh, it's about men. Let's answer that one. What about men? Do men have estrogen and what happens with them? Well, I just mentioned it, but I want to mention it again. Men have tons of estrogen in their body. Men should love estrogen too, but they don't have it circulating in their blood. So if you measure estrogen levels in a male, they're not going to be high. They should be quite low. But they have plenty of estrogen. They make it in many organs. That's called paracrine. When it's made in an organ and it circulates in the blood where it has an effect on another organ, that's endocrine. When it's made in an organ for use within that organ, that's paracrine. And in fact, some cells make it and then it's used within that cell, that's intracrine. So the hormonal system is complex, it's amazing. Men, where do you get your estrogen from? You get it from your testosterone. Testosterone is converted through an enzyme aromatase into estradiol. You also get it from your adrenal androgens, particularly DHEA and DHEA sulfate, and they also can be converted into estrogens in particular organs for use in those organs. So that's a lot about hormones. We'll talk much more about them. It's an endless wonderful story about what hormones do in the body. One of these times we're going to talk about endocrine disruptors, those ubiquitous chemicals out there that are interfering with the normal functioning of our hormones. But for today, know that menopause is universal, but it is not beneficial. And we need to be aware that risk increases for many things, including infection with the coronavirus as we age as females. So take care, stay well, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you next time. So long.